Say you're in the market for a crossover SUV, but you don't really need a third row, but you still value space and you still want something stylish. So can I steer you in the direction of the HR-V? Now, Honda introduced the facelifted version earlier this year, and I have to say it kind of stands out a bit more. And this is the RS model, so it gets a bit of black mascara up here and more black down here and even down on the aprons. What I really like actually about the front is this black chrome effect. It kind of reminds me of the Civic RS, and it adds a bit more to the aggression. Now the orange paint, meanwhile, is something I rather like. It reminds me of the Civic SIR from back in the 90s, and onto the side it actually has pretty decent ground clearance, and these wheels are a bit of a love-hate affair, although I'd say a bit more silver trimming would make it stand out a bit more. Now again, this is the RS model, so door mirror caps and black side skirts, and when you get to the back, it's a bit of a smoked effect on the taillight as one of the highlights of 2018. And also, there's more black highlights down in the lower garnish of the bumper. Now inside the HR-V, well, it's more of the same, but actually the first thing you'll notice is the new infotainment system. It's no longer the Honda OE system, it's now by Kenwood, and inside it there are more functions, and you can even get Spotify and other apps in it. Unfortunately, the drawback of that is this up here. It looks like they attached a lapel to the car's ceiling, but fortunately they place it somewhere that you won't really notice it, so I guess you could forgive them for that. As for everything else in the interior, there's a lot of soft padding all over the place, and even the rear doors get those soft padding materials. As for the seats, well, they're pretty comfortable actually, and they actually offer a fair amount of bolsterings on each side. What I do like about the HR-V's interior though is the raised center console, and it brings the shifter closer to me, and I reckon Honda had the driver in mind when they designed the interior, because everything here is facing towards me. Of course, passengers aren't going to be left behind. They actually get neat air vents here. There's 3 of them right in front of his face. And typical Honda, I guess, there's loads of room inside. I actually have a lot of leg room here and headroom here in the front as well. And this is despite the fact that I've actually pumped the seat all the way up just so I could see ahead of me. And then you get to the back. Now you'd think because of its sort of sloped roofline, you'd think that it's pretty cramped here at the back, but I'm actually comfortable here. There's even a fair amount of stretch out room and decent headroom. Although if you're about 6 feet tall, you might end up brushing it. After all, it is a design limitation. But nonetheless, it's pretty spacious here at the back. So one thing I do wish the HR-V did have were rear sockets for USBs and air conditioning vents. That's not to say the air conditioning's hot, but it's just nice to have those. One thing about the HR-V also is this high windowsill. So you have the impression that you're seated in a sedan rather than a crossover, which is strange because you don't get that same impression when you're seated in front. In front you have a wide view of what's ahead of you, while at the back it's more of a window line really. Of course, the HR-V is based on the Jazz after all, so it has a pretty ingenious seat system which boosts your luggage area. Let me show you. Now, because you are looking for a crossover, you'd expect a lot of cargo space, so that's exactly what you get in the HR-V. It's low, flat, wide, lots of usable space inside, and there's this rather interesting parcel shelf you could actually fold. But anyway, that's not the highlight. The highlight actually is in the second row, because Honda gives you the option to fold down the seats. You may be wondering what's the big deal with that, but only Honda offers you the option of folding the seat bottoms upwards so you could store tall items in the second row. It's pretty smart, isn't it? Before we go out for a drive, let me show you this neat feature. This electronic parking brake really wants me to wear the seatbelt. As you should, because it's not gonna let me go unless I'm strapped in. That's a nice way to promote safety, I say. Now, we've driven the HR-V a couple of months ago in the widening roads of Tagaytay, and I'm sticking to my first impressions of it. I still believe it needs a bit more power. Now, 140 horsepower is commendable in today's standards, but I don't know, it just feels a bit strained sometimes if you're trying to overtake people. But on the daily basis, you're not really gonna notice the lack of grunt. And actually, the trade-off of that is great fuel economy. Now, I'm doing 9.7 kilometers per liter, and this is in a mix of moderate to heavy traffic. Although right now in the background, you see that it's actually pretty good right now. Now, this figure was achieved at 18 kilometers per hour average. So that gives you an idea of how efficient it is on a daily drive. And who says you need a diesel all the time? This can deliver pretty good mileage. And out on the highway, you're looking at figures of 15 to 16 even. Now, there's another thing to like about the HR-V, and that is comfort. Now, as we all know, EDSA isn't exactly the smoothest of pavements, but as you can see, the camera isn't shaking around that much, and that's a sign that the ride is pretty supple. On rougher pavement, it still actually maintains its composure, and handling is actually not that bad at all. I mean, it's based on a Honda Jazz after all, and it is wider than it, so you turn it into a corner and it can be fun. But if there's one thing to really like about the HR-V is the ride. As you can see, the camera isn't shaking that much, and that gives you an idea of just how comfortable it is in here. So just imagine you're tired from work and all that. You're driving along a rather rough road, and you're assured that the HR-V won't add to your stress because, well, it offers great amount of comfort. Also, another thing is these seats. Now, what I like about them is they're sort of scalloped, so they catch your back and it offers pretty good lumbar support as well. Overall, the HR-V, I would say, is a comfortable vehicle. But that's not to say that handling is one of its low points. In fact, handling can be on the fun side. I mean, it is based on the Honda Jazz after all, and it is wider than the Jazz, so you feel a bit more confident chucking it into a corner. But of course, on the daily drive, you're not really going to do that, so the good handling translates to safe handling. And while we're at safety, it comes standard with stability control, so should an impending accident happen in front of you, you have more chances of avoiding it. However, if there's one thing they could improve on also, that would be tire noise. Now, there seems to be a lot emanating from the floor, although I think it's more of the tire's fault rather than the car's insulation. So maybe if you install quieter tires on it, it'll be a bit more hushed in the cabin. And when it comes to brakes, well, it's typical Honda. It can be a little grabby when it's cold, but warm it up a bit and it feels a bit more gradual, more progressive, and you're not gonna head bang you or your passengers' heads against the dashboard. So props to Honda for tuning good brakes. At 1,495,000 pesos, the HR-V RS isn't exactly what I'd call affordable, especially given the fact that most of its rivals are priced way below it. You could even get a small crossover these days for about 1,000,000 pesos, so the HR-V is one of the more expensive options in its class. Price aside, there's a lot to like about the HR-V. The ride, the fuel economy, the ingenious use of interior space, the safety equipment. If all those matter to you, and price isn't an object to you, go ahead and get the HR-V. I like it.